Welcome to the Burnout Recovery Podcast, a guiding resource dedicated to healthcare professionals on their journey to overcoming burnout. Spearheaded by Dr. Joe Braid, a certified professional coach and rehabilitation physician.
Hello and welcome to the Burnout Recovery Podcast. This week, I am so delighted to bring onto the podcast my guest, Sally Orange. Hi, Sally. Welcome today.
Hey, Joe. Really lovely to chat to you after all these years.
Sally Orange comes to Orange. Sally Orange is not in Orange, but Sally, I'm recording from Orange, and it's so great to have you here. And Sally and I knew each other from way back when we were both at uni in Nottingham. We connected over being potential officers in the Territorial Army. Now, Sally's gone on to have an amazing career and now is a pioneering mental health advocate, also an endurance athlete and a professional speaker who uses the power of sport and storytelling to challenge stigma and inspire change. She's also a former Army physiotherapy officer with 22 years of service. Sally's going to explain more about her journey, I guess, through these last 22 and more years since we've caught up, how transforming your struggles has gone into a mission to break down barriers. And I'm so excited to hear what you'll be able to share with my audience today, Sally. So it's really great to have you on the podcast. I know we've going to have a really rich and meaningful discussion today.
Oh yeah, thanks. So, well, you say that I'm not in Orange. I might not physically be in Orange in the place, but I'm wearing orange in your honour instead.
Yeah, that's it. And you possibly could have been wearing an orange outfit, couldn't you? Like really an orange outfit, a slice of orange.
I often do, but I'll explain a little bit more why as we go on.
Yeah, great. Okay, so Sally, you served 22 exemplary years in the Royal Army Medical Corps before being medically retired due to mental health challenges. And how would you tell the listeners that this transition reshaped your identity, and what wisdom would you share with others facing significant life challenges that they didn't choose?
Great question there, Joe. And I think the key to me there is the didn't choose. Unfortunately, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to leave the military. I was passionate about what I did, and it was something that I did in my weekends and in the evenings. But unfortunately, my mental health had got to a point where it was so severe, the struggles that I was having with depression and anxiety, that I was told that it wasn't the right environment for me. And I'm going to be honest, it was really, really difficult. You know, this is something that it was what sort of made me, you know, being an army officer, being a physiotherapist, being a physiotherapy army officer was who I felt I was. So having that taken away from me it felt like my identity had been stripped from me. And, you know, a lot of people, things come to an end, so people have to leave the military. But this, I didn't feel was my time, and I felt that I'd still got a huge amount to offer them. I was incredibly fortunate that not long after being medically discharged by the Army Cadet Force actually got in contact and asked if I would be their national ambassador. So the Army Cadet Force is obviously young people, 12 to 18-year-olds, who are not necessarily looking to join the army, but it's, you know, sort of developing their moral, their physical, their sort of, you know, different values. And it was, for me, allowed me to put that uniform on. It was in a completely different role, but it was in a role where one organisation had basically told me, we don't want you because of your mental health, you know, the struggles that you're having. Yet another one totally embraced me, and because I'd been open, they felt that actually that could help young people, and that to me actually was a better fit. And now looking back, my wings were probably clipped when I was in the military. There was quite a few different officers or people who didn't like me going off and doing things. I think it challenged their sort of own identity or their own sort of self, I don't know, maybe self-esteem, and they didn't like it. So would put a stop to that. But actually now I'm much more freer, and I've been able to have a much bigger impact than had I have stayed in the military. I could never have done, a lot of the things that I now do if I was still serving. But I think, the reason that got me into physiotherapy was that I broke my leg when I was younger. So that sort of that's what made me want to become a physio. And I think having my own struggles with depression, anxiety, and it did get to the point where I couldn't see a reason to live. I didn't leave the house for 2 months, and I didn't speak on a phone for 2 years. And I think having had that experience, I don't want to see anyone else ever have to go through that. So if that means me telling my story and championing it, then I would do anything so that others don't have to do that. So I suppose it's that crossover really of how I've moved into what I do, which, believe me, is not a career that anyone at school would ever say, that's what I want to do when I grow older.
Gosh, what an inspiration, Sally. And what an interesting shift sort of with two careers that both sort of have army in them, and the different branches, and the clipping of your wings, I think, is such a visual of one location that you're in. And now that you're got that visual of you flying and soaring, and this is where I'm meant to be, and I feel really welcomed and belonging here.
At the time, Jo, when I remember when seeing one of the psychologists one time in one of the therapy sessions when I was due to be leaving, and I knew that I was going to struggle. And I remember her saying to me, it's a little bit like the salad and the lemonade bottle. And I thought, I'm the one in therapy. What on earth is she talking about? And she said, there's nothing wrong with the lemonade bottle, and there's nothing wrong with the salad. It's just that the lemonade bottle doesn't belong in the salad. And that's kind of what I've really sort of seen as, actually, there isn't anything wrong with me. I perhaps just didn't fit in that environment, and possibly a more softer environment of the Army Cadet Force is where I, possibly thrive more than I did. I loved my time in the military and got to do some incredible things, but I did struggle with some of the personalities. So yeah, life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. Wow. Great to hear. Yeah, really good. So you're also an amazing athlete. Check this out. You've completed marathons on every continent, dressed as different fruits, tackled the Marathon des Sables, and even cycled across New Zealand. And so how has pursuing these extraordinary physical challenges contributed to your mental health recovery? And what might this teach us about finding our own healing or recovery adventures?
Yeah, I have done. I kind of think if I've done it, it can't be that difficult. But I have actually done 85 marathons now and 8 full Ironmans. And I think one of the best things is just getting outdoors. I've just come back from Argentina and climbing the highest mountain in South America. And for me, though, it's not just about the challenge. It's actually about giving a purpose to each of the challenges. So if I just give you a few examples. So I swam from Alcatraz. I did a triathlon called Escape from Alcatraz. Now, Alcatraz is a prison, and mental illness to me is like being a prisoner in your own mind. And I wanted to make the invisible illness visible. So it was an event, lots of people taking part, and we were to jump off a boat into the waters outside Alcatraz. Everybody else was dressed in a black wetsuit, and I had a black wetsuit on, but on top I had a black and white striped convict outfit because I wanted to make the invisible illness visible. I was the only one that you could see on the video as the jump off. People they're going, oh, that was me. That you can't tell, everybody looks the same. So I stood out. And I then started swimming, and the waters of around Alcatraz are treacherous. They're very, very cold, and there's a really strong current. And I remember swimming, and I got to a point, and I suddenly was just thinking, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm just, fighting and fighting and fighting. And it suddenly hit me that this was like my mental health, that at one point I was fighting and fighting and fighting and not getting anywhere. I didn't want the help, or I didn't want to take medication. I didn't want to speak to anyone. I wanted to do it myself, but I wasn't getting anywhere. And I told myself, Sally, just go with the flow. So when I was in the water, I remember just seeing the shore and just finding myself really quickly going along the side. I got myself to the side and I got myself to safety. And that reminded me, like, when I was with the crisis team with my mental health, it wasn't where I wanted to be, but I was safe. So I then found my way back to the transition, got on my bike and set off cycling around the hills of San Francisco. They're very hilly. And it reminded me of just thinking, this is the highs and lows, or the ups and downs of mental illness. And then it came to the run, and we had to run past the Golden Gate Bridge. And as I was running past it on the way back, I remember stopping and just looking at it and thinking, oh my goodness, that bridge is the friends, the family, the support mechanisms, the professionals that help you bridge the gap to escape from Alcatraz. And when I kind of worked this out, I was like, it's a way of telling a story and narrating it so that other people can understand. Similar to, I did a marathon in the London Eye. So during the pandemic, it was an opportunity to do the London Marathon your way. So I got a treadmill in the London Eye in one of the pods. And I don't know about yourselves, but we had to be in bubbles, during COVID. And it was symbolizing that we were all moving forward, but we felt like we were going around in circles. And we know for everyone during that time, there were some really great times, but there was also some really difficult times. And it was just a way of sort of using this narrative. And then 6 days later, on World Mental Health Day, I did the world's deepest underground marathon in a mine. And it was a mile to get down to where we were running. And then it was under the North Sea, and called it Beneath the Surface, because you never know what's going on beneath the surface in somebody else's mind. So I then, after quite a few marathons, somebody said to me, "You're completely nuts." And I thought, what a good idea. I ran as different fruits, and I thought, I'll run as a nut. So I got a peanut costume, and I had a sign on me that said, "Nuts about mental health, together we can crack it," and got the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a nut. So, it's kind of, I guess, the World Marathon Challenge then. That was 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days. And that was to take the mental health message around the world, because it does not discriminate. Every country, wherever you are, there are struggles with mental illness. And then last year, I wanted to take the message to the top of the world. So I took on the Everest Marathon, the highest marathon in the world, and really wanted to shout about it. So that people know that they're not alone, and it is okay to get help with that.
So much running, so much communicating your message, like showing up in the dynamic way that you do, Sally, when you're in these I guess, like visible times in the year as well, when you're doing the running, when you're doing the marathons. I love that story around the triathlon around Alcatraz. We went there as a family a number of years back, and it had a really eerie feel about the island, and knowing that the waters were so cold and choppy and difficult to sort of navigate. I think what I was hearing in your story there, which overlaps with some aspects of approaching burnout recovery, is the individuals who can be so resistant to ask for help. And in burnout, often people will try different things on their own. Overworking is quite a common thing, because they start feeling somewhat productive if they just throw more at it and see something getting done, rather than the reduced productivity that can happen with burnout. And I would love if you just would elaborate a little bit more around sort of noticing the moment when you go, I do need help to get out of this situation that I'm in, or to get through this situation that I'm in. You gave us that analogy in the water. Are there any other scenarios, maybe with your time in the military, when you noticed that it was a time to ask for help, and how you went about that?
I think it's almost the other way around. I think a lot of people will notice it in you So it's often hard to recognize in yourself.
Okay.
So it's really sort of listening to other people. Other people can notice that you're perhaps not yourself, or that things are getting, really quite unhealthy. I remember when I was actually under the crisis team, and I remember having to go back and live at my parents' for some time. And it wasn't until I actually returned back to my flat that I saw the state of my flat. And I was like, what happened here? I'd had 2 months at my parents, and I'd sort of gone back, and I was like, wow, this is not, and other people had perhaps seen that around me. So I think it's having the belief that others are there for your best interest, because we're very good when you're in this sort of pits. And the reason I also say about, Alcatraz in a prison and feeling like a prisoner in your own mind is that, if you think as a listener, how would you feel if you were in prison? You'd probably feel alone, guilty, shame, and they're the same feelings that mental illness can make you feel. And it's kind of really sort of listening to others, because they have got your best interests at heart. So often we can think, oh, they're only doing this because we've got this defensive sort of, or certainly with, myself with my mental illness, it's very much, about being defensive and trying to prove yourself. But actually, generally, people are just trying to help each other. So that's what I would say, is to listen to those around you.
Yeah, great. Oh, thanks. No, good to hear that approach there. Let's talk a little bit about your fruit costumes philosophy. A bit of a change in topic, but it kind of comes with you. I don't know when you first put a fruit costume on. Your signature fruit costumes have become part of your identity as you break world records. So what inspired this colourful approach to endurance events, and how has bringing playfulness and humour into serious challenges impacted your mindset and the way others respond to your mental health message?
I can remember the exact first time that I wore my costume. It was 2007. I remember when I was 8 years old, watching the very first London Marathon and thinking, wow, that looks amazing. The atmosphere, the people, different shapes and sizes. I thought, I want to do that one day. But it took me until I was 34 until I plucked up the courage to actually think that I was good enough to able to do that, to be able to do it. And I also just remember thinking, well, let's make it fun, fun at the same time. And my name's Orange. And I thought, oh, why don't I run as an orange? And I can remember crossing the line and just think I actually pipped an apple to the post when there was somebody running as an apple. And I pipped him to the post. And just having this feeling of like, wow, this is amazing. And I did actually go to Afghanistan, and while I was out there, we did a marathon, and I managed to get some banana costumes sent out, and I did it with a friend, and she was a really good marathon runner. And she said to me after that, she said, Sally, that is the most fun marathon that I've ever ran. I mean, she was aiming to get into the Commonwealth Games, so she had never done a marathon as slow as she had when she was with me. But I think that kind of made me realise that it helps with community. It helps people smile. Now, whether you're running or whether you're supporting, I've had so many people smile, and kids in particular, really, really smile. And then they'll kind of go, why? Why are you dressed as an apple, orange, or banana? And I just say, I want to break the conversation. I want to break the stigma and change the conversation with poor mental health. Mm-hmm. And what that does more often than not is that somebody will say, oh, I've had a problem, or I know someone who's had a problem. And it just opens up that conversation in a way that I believe we should all be able to talk about. We all have colds every now and again. And, we just say, how are you? Oh, I felt awful. I had a cold last week. We know that sometimes you have to go home. You have to, have a day or two at home. And then you're okay again. You know, and that should be the same with, you know, with your mental health, of just saying, I'm really struggling at the moment, or, you know, people will be, how can I help you? So yeah, that's part of it, but also sort of what I realized with doing it was quite often people would say with a marathon, oh, what time are you going for? Or what time did you get? And for me, it was never about time. And so I always said to people, the time of my life. Because if I set myself the goal of doing 4 hours in a marathon, my brain is one that if I get 4:02, I will feel a complete failure. And I'm not necessarily in control of whether or not I get that 4 hours. It could be the weather. There could be, you know, something happens. There could be other people around that prevent that. But if I change the reason why I'm running, if I change it to, you know, to go out and have a good time, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the fittest, but if I have a good time and I can raise money for charity, then that to me is, you know, is the goal. We all get the same medal at the end, whether you come first or last, you get the same medal. And if I can either help somebody else on their first marathon, or, you know, people struggle at different points. So if you can be that person to help somebody, then for me, that is what I get, you know, what I get more enjoyment out of. And it's, yeah, just sort of saying to young people, you don't have to take it completely serious. If you just go out and you're moving and having fun, then you can make yourself and other people feel good at the same time. So yeah, that's kind of where I know it's, you know, a little bit, it's a little bit random, but you know, I was an apple when I did the New York marathon, so I was a big apple. And New Zealand, I dressed as a kiwi fruit. I actually climbed a mountain dressed as a bunch of grapes in Argentina, because I thought, well, you know, why not? So, but yeah, it just makes different people smile. And in fact, I have a really beautiful story from the Everest Marathon. So I did that dressed as a lemon because I wanted to be ice and a slice. I knew it was going to be cold at base camp where the marathon started. Mm-hmm. And I had told my Nepalese guide that I had been to base camp before, and I'd actually not been able to go to Kalapatar. And he said, why? And I said, I was in my tent crying. And he said, altitude sickness. I said, no, it wasn't actually. I said, I struggle with depression and anxiety, and I just didn't feel good enough. I just didn't think I'd be able to get to the top. And he said, you struggle with depression and anxiety? I said, yeah. I said, I take medication, and, you know, so I kind of got management strategies now to help me. And he said, wow. He said, do you think I struggle? And I said, no, you know, he's this great, gregarious, fun-loving guide. And he said, I really struggle with alcohol. I really struggle with anxiety. And I said, how do you manage it? And he said, alcohol. So anyway, I did the marathon, finished the marathon, hardest marathon of my life because it is very, very hilly, and there's not a lot of air. Anyway, I finished the marathon, and we had 2 more days to walk back down. And he said to me, he said, Sally, I need your help. I said, right. He said, if I don't get help within, you know, I'm not going to be here in the next 10 years. And he said, I need your charity's help. I said, I don't have a charity. I just raise money for charity. I said, but, you know, let's wait till we get back to Kathmandu. And I'm sure that we can find some way. Anyway, I'm pleased to say that he has been in contact with his GP. He's now getting help. He's doing a lot of meditation, and I'm still in contact with him. And he said, Sally, you saved my life. And to me, yes, achieving the marathon, you know, great, well done. It was a hard marathon. But the bigger achievement to me was the fact that a male felt that they could open up to me, but more so a Nepalese male of a very, very different culture, you know, could open up. And yeah, he's now said that he's happy to talk about it. And so we're actually going back to go and make a film, so that we can sort of spread the word. So wow. Yeah, there's some, you know, really sort of interesting stories that sort of, you know, come out of it, all because I was dressed as a lemon, because we wouldn't have had that conversation had I doubt we would have had that conversation. So yeah, it's come up with some quite interesting stories.
So yeah, amazing. From a conversation starter to really helping somebody else with their mental health, and then like a bigger way to to broadcast the message and share the message coming in the near future by the sounds of it as well, Sally.
Yeah, we're hoping that the film will then sort of go to the the Kendal Film Festival, the Banff Film Festival, the Kathmandu Film Festival, and really sort of show the power of the mountains and the power of outdoors, and the conversations that you have. And I often believe that outdoors, whether it be walking, running, cycling, you're not sitting face to face. I'll often say to someone if they're struggling, do you want to go for a walk? Because that way, I've had it so many times when I've been crying. And if you're sat opposite someone, it's quite intimidating. Whereas actually, when you're walking and not having to look at somebody, I mean, just think about when you travel in a car, you have all kinds of conversations when you're not looking at each other. So yeah, walking, cycling, running, then, you get the best out of people, and people will tell you, quite a lot about themselves. And they kind of go, I just can't believe I'm telling you this. Like, it doesn't matter. It's fine.
Yeah. So good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So relatable. Something about the outdoors and walking in parallel or walking side by side, or however you want to describe that. I can, really get what you mean. And we might even see you at the Banff Film Festival here, because that does usually screen here in Orange. So that would be amazing.
Oh, my goodness.
Also looking forward to whenever you're doing an Aussie marathon. I just haven't heard Australia on the list yet, Sally, and there's a lot of countries you've listed.
I did one just outside. Where did it? Outside Melbourne. I did it dressed as a peach.
Oh, cool!
Yeah. So
fun.
I have, because I've done every continent now.
Yeah.
So but now that I've done every continent as a piece of fruit, I am actually doing every continent as a vegetable. So I've already Antarctica. And if you're going to be a frozen, I know it's going to be frozen because it's going to be so cold. If you're going to be a frozen vegetable, what would you say? Yes, I was a pod of peas. But actually, that was also a bit of a strategy. So when I was doing the 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days, that had a high potential of failure. It was a tough challenge, 16 different time zones, one marathon after another, get on a plane. It might be that the plane landed at 2:00 in the morning. It might be 4:00 in the afternoon. And I knew that if I didn't achieve it, I would struggle with the failure element. So I kind of built in this buffer almost, that I told myself I'm going to do every continent as a vegetable. And Antarctica is the hardest continent to get to. It's most expensive, and it's not something, to be taken lightly. Or I thought, well, that is the first marathon of this challenge. So if I do that as a vegetable, if for any reason the rest of the challenge doesn't work out, I've still started another project that I've got something to sort of build on. So I've actually got the London Marathon in a few weeks' time, and I'm doing that dressed as a lettuce. And I'm going to have a sign on me that says, "Let us talk about mental health."
Yeah, fantastic.
I'll be a little gem, but I might be a wet lettuce at the end because I do sweat a lot.
Oh, Sally, so good. So good. So let's round this out with the final question. As someone who pushes physical and mental boundaries regularly, what daily practices or mindset approaches help you maintain your well-being between these major challenges? And what small but powerful habits might our listeners adopt to build their own resilience?
Well, the challenges are sort of what keep me well in some ways. Often, and something really real is the marathon blues, because people have spent so much time training that then they do the marathon, then straight after, and then they kind of have this big gaping hole. I've learned to sort of mitigate that by having another challenge in the pipeline. It doesn't necessarily have to be another physical or sporting challenge. It might be learning a language, or it might be learning to knit, just something that is going to be, a challenge. But when I was training for that, the World Marathon Challenge, I did actually work with a resilience coach because, as I say, I knew there was going to be quite a lot of things that I, potentially could struggle with. And one thing I learned there was the cookie jar. And basically what the cookie jar is you're building a jar of sort of metaphorical cookies. And what these cookies are all the things that you have achieved in the past, so that if you're suddenly feeling low, you can dip into that metaphorical cookie jar, pick something, pick a cookie out and go, oh, you swam the channel last year, Sally. You cycled across America. You've run 85. So when you're low, you can go, but you got through that last time, so you can do that this time. And one thing that I say to people is, you wouldn't learn to swim in a storm. So if you think about when you learn to swim, you're in a swimming pool, you're supported, you're encouraged, you practice and practice and practice, and you do that in a really calm environment. So essentially, when you're well is when you learn the techniques, should you need them when you get into that storm. If someone is thrown into a storm, they don't stand a chance. And I really relate to that because I didn't feel I could ask for help, and I didn't feel that, it felt like a weakness to ask. And so I let it get until I was at crisis point where I didn't stand a chance really, of being able to learn these techniques. But now if I start to feel myself sort of going downhill, they're well practiced techniques of, either getting up and going out for a walk or, journaling or, meditation. And sometimes it can just be as simple as getting up and cleaning your teeth. It might be that you go back to bed, but, there's been times where I haven't showered, or I've showered and then gone back to bed, but I've still at least achieved something. So for me, it would be that knowing that it's just as important, if not more important, to learn the things that make you feel better when you're well. And if you remember what they are, when you start to not do so well, then, for me, it's going and, having a massage or going having a facial. And they're just things that, what are the things that you enjoy, that can help you fill up your cup. Because you can't drink from an empty cup.
Yeah. I love that. Some great strategies there. The cookie jar is great. That's really good. And those other things that you would be doing if you were well. So what can I tap into again and book in for that?
Because when you become very unwell, you become overwhelmed and you can't remember the things. So I even have a list of people who are good to call, because I can think, I've got nobody to call, but actually they, I have, but I just don't always remember who they are. And, when you feel very low, well, what makes you feel better? Nothing. Because you can't think outside of how to, and I'm not saying it's easy. Another thing is just to have, I kind of have a tin of just things in there that make me feel good. It might be different. I've got stone, a really small, smooth stone, or, different smells. And it's almost like a first, mental health first aid kit. Ways that you can go and pull out the cupboard and go, what makes me feel better, and using all those senses. So, what tastes good, what smells good, what feels good. It might be a photo, photos of people of happy times and, memorable times. And so that sort of physical first aid kit, with a mental health first aid kit, essentially.
I love that. Oh, that's so good, Sally. Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing so many wonderful stories of how you've navigated, mental health challenges and what that has brought you through to choosing to do, and this wonderful, colourful career that you do have. I know people are going to get a lot from what you shared today. I certainly have. It's been a really wonderfully rich discussion. And
if you could say, Juicy,
yeah.
There's a lot of puns. When you've lived with this name for 50 years, there are a lot of puns.
I bet. Yeah. So let's find out where people can find you. I'll list this in the show notes, but just tell people where you like to hang out.
So I've got a website, sallyorange.com, or I'm on Instagram. It's actually Sally Orange MBE, and also on LinkedIn and Facebook as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll be sure to list those for everybody so they can track you down and connect with you as well. So Sally, really great to have you on the podcast today. Thanks so much for your time and wishing you all the best with your next marathon. You said that's the London Marathon?
London as a lettuce, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. Wishing you all the very best with that. Thank you again so much for coming on the Burnout Recovery Podcast. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Jo. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode. Schedule a 60-minute power hour with me and leave with relief, decisions made, and clear next steps. Or send me an email for a speaking inquiry. All information is available at drjobraid.com with links in the show notes.